Number one team in the country, UConn Huskies. Listen, so it's interesting. So first of all, everybody listening knows, but final score, UConn goes to Creighton. Final score, 85-66. Creighton beats UConn. And it's funny because even in the lead up to Tuesday night's game, obviously a lot of people listen to Monday's Aaron Torres pod. We reacted to UConn obliterating Marquette on Saturday in Hartford. Final score there was a 28-point margin victory. And on Monday's show, we talked a lot about, is there a way to beat UConn? And if so, what the heck is it? Okay. So that has been the topic of conversation. Even throughout the day on Tuesday, I had people checking in on the pod saying, Torres, talk more about UConn. They are so unbelievable, blah, 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 blah. They go to Creighton, and it does not go well. Now, in terms of this game, listen, a couple things stand out. First of all, weird game. UConn jumped out to like a 7-2 lead. Then, unfortunately, the refs got involved. There were a lot of fouls. UConn had three players pick up two fouls very quickly. Donovan Clingan, the starting center, Hassan Diarra, the backup point guard, and then, of course, Samson Johnson, the other big guy. So foul trouble was an issue early. Three-point defense was an issue. We're going to get to all of that. But before we get to all of it, let me start by just shouting out Creighton. Listen, Creighton is a really good team that I just think they really haven't had this moment where they just kind of get the praise heaped on them, right? This is a team, remember, last year made the Elite Eight. They've been good this year, but inconsistent. As I've said, I don't know that they have that signature win all season long. They were not great in the out of conference. They've been okay in Big East play. They entered the night at 10-5 overall, but again, did not have that signature victory. So for them, listen, we'll get to the UConn perspective here momentarily, but all the credit goes to them. They were at home. The crowd was great. For people who maybe are just getting into college hoops, Creighton, Omaha is always a tough place to play. UConn has actually never won there since ever, but certainly since rejoining the Big East about 4 or 5 years ago. And listen, UConn fans are going to talk about the refs. They're going to talk about this. They're going to talk about that. The bottom line is Creighton just came out more fired up than anybody, and they deserve to win this game. Now, with the bigger picture with UConn, I do want to talk about that because as I just said, on Monday's show, we talked a lot about, is there any way to beat UConn? Coming into the game, they were obviously on a 14-game winning streak. They had just beaten Marquette, as I just said. And the thing that really stood out to me, and we talked about it on Monday's show, was if you went through the stats, there aren't a lot of places that UConn can really be exposed, okay? This is a team that's top 5 on offense in college basketball, top 15 nationally in defense, and even those numbers are a little skewed because Donovan Clingan, their star center, was not playing for a good chunk of the early part of the season. When he is in the lineup, they are a completely different team. Assist-to-turnover ratio is great. Rebounding is great. Three-point shooting is great. And so you look at what happened on Saturday. You said, can UConn be beaten? And it was funny because I actually spent a lot of time on Tuesday afternoon just sitting down and looking at UConn, really doing a deep dive. It's kind of part of a project that I may be working on towards March Madness. We'll discuss that as it gets closer. But I really tried to figure out, okay, what is the actual blueprint to beating UConn? And I really only came up with 2 things that you have to do as an opponent to beat them. The first thing is with UConn, they do not have a ton of depth, okay? Basically, for people who don't follow UConn on a day-to-day basis, their starting 5 all averages double figures. Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton, Steph Castle, Donovan Clingan, and Alex Caravan. But they really only play 2 guys off the bench. Hassan Diarra, veteran guard, Samson Johnson, veteran big. And so when I was looking at how do you beat UConn, 1, you got to get them in foul trouble because at the end of the day, they don't have a lot of bodies that they really rely on. And so if you can get into their bench, that is a cause for concern with UConn. That's exactly what happened on Tuesday night. As I said, three of those 7 players that regularly play all picked up 2 fouls in the first couple minutes. Yes, UConn fans, some of them were cheap. Donovan Clingan, one of them that he picked up was cheap. Hassan Diarra, one of the fouls that he picked up was cheap. No, UConn fans, that is not the reason that you lost the game. The second way to beat UConn, you got to make threes. And it's funny because if you want to go and talk about the closest thing to a weakness that UConn has, and again, it's all relative. A lot of people would like to have the weaknesses that UConn has. It is 3-point defense. They rank about 73rd nationally, I believe was the number that I saw on Tuesday. That is by no means bad, but relative to everybody else, relative to everything else that they do so well, it's the weakest link that they have defensively. And so I bring it up because Creighton is a great three-point shooting team, and they were lights the frick out on Tuesday night. Okay, so they finished the game. How about this? From beyond the three-point arc, they finished, let me make sure I have these stats right, at exactly 50%, 5-0, 14 for 28 from beyond the three-point line. And if you just want to know that it was Creighton's night, how about this? Kid by the name of Jason Green off the bench had not made a three all year. He made 2 for Creighton in this game. And as I said, overall, they hit 14 as a team. Steve Ashworth, who's been struggling for most of the year, finishes making 5 as well. Now, let's talk big picture for both teams. Big picture for UConn. Listen, I'm not worried. You look at UConn, and by the way, I put out that stat about, I put out a tweet, something about basically, that if UConn does have a weakness, this is what it is. UConn fans got mad. Oh, Torres, they don't have. It's like, well, I'm trying to nitpick here because it's hard to find one. But I think if you're a UConn fan, you got to be positive. This is as tough of an environment as you will play in basically the rest of the year against a team that is essentially as closely built to be able to beat you as there possibly is. Simply put, you're not going to face a team like Creighton that shoots the three ball as well as Creighton did tonight, and you're certainly not going to do it in an environment like what they faced on Tuesday night. Toughest road environment they have left. They still have to play at Providence, at Marquette. But listen, those teams don't shoot the ball quite like Creighton does, and I don't expect them to shoot the ball like they did tonight, okay? So that's one. I do think if you're looking for teams to beat UConn, again, the blueprint is there. Got to be able to hit threes. Got to be able to hit them in volume, and you need size down low because UConn obviously is so big. But from the UConn perspective, I'm really not worried. You look at the pathway the rest of the way. They still have a full 2-game lead in the Big East standings. They would need to lose 2 games to be tied with Marquette, even if Marquette wins out, okay? So they'll probably be the number 1 seed in the Big East tournament. And obviously, as UConn fans know, the pathway will be there once they get to the NCAA tournament. They'll start in Brooklyn, regional will be in Boston, and as long as they don't fall apart down the stretch, they have a pathway where they don't have to get on a plane before they obviously would have to then go to the Final Four and play Arizona. Last thought from the Creighton person. By the way, one last thing on UConn. My buddy Rob Douster, I saw him say this. Tristan Newton took over this game, 27 points for the veteran guard. And I think that's a great sign if you're UConn as well. Because at the end of the day, you are going to need, there's going to be a game, whether it's whoever, second round, Big East tournament, NCAA tournament, whatever, Final Four, where other stuff isn't working. And you need somebody to step up and make plays. Tristan Newton does that, 27 points tonight. By the way, I was at the Kansas game where he went off as well, so this isn't the first time. Creighton, really quickly, listen, nothing but positives to say about them. As I said, 20-7 now, 11-5 in the Big East. It looks as though they are trending towards probably the 3 seed in the Big East tournament. Creighton, to their credit, again, they just came out. They came out ready to play. Did they hit some shots that maybe they wouldn't normally hit? Sure. It doesn't take away from the fact that they were the deserving winner. And if you look at their final stretch, it is pretty manageable. At St. John's, which is struggling. I talked on YouTube about Rick Pitino the other day. Seton Hall at home, Marquette at home, at Villanova. A lot of those games are not easy, but those are winnable games for Creighton. I expect them to probably end up as the 3 seed in the Big East tournament. And listen, I did pick Creighton to go to the Final Four in the preseason. But listen, I like this team. They're starting to get better. This was about as well as they could possibly play. Credit to them for knocking off the number 1 team in the country. UConn, by the way, returns to the court on Saturday against Villanova at home. That is a college game day game. UConn's playing well when ESPN doesn't even have the rights to their game, and college game day is still going to stores. UConn's going to be fine. Creighton's really good. Credit to the Creighton Blue Jays for winning that game.